top 3 lessons that you remember from yesterday. You could even say the day before, okay, for the last 2 days. Top 3 lessons, work by yourself, just write that down. It doesn't have to be like the title of the lesson, but some concept or something that you heard that you really appreciated or like. My feelings won't be hurt if you don't put down my name as like the favorite part of this as the training facilitator, okay? It's just so you know. Yeah, good. It'd make me feel awkward anyways, so. You can look at your notes too from the past few days. Okay. Let's just take turns sharing something that you felt was really helpful or meaningful to you. Sasha, let's start with you.
For me, it was just that teaching in groups is a crucial.
Teaching and learning in groups, yeah, group learning. We're going to hear a little bit more about that today. How about you, Brad?
I like the fact that the Great Commission has always been the argument that everybody, we've always just said, yes, it is, yes, it is, but how can we really prove that? And what you said about teaching to obey, all that he has commanded includes going. That proof is in the text.
Yeah.
In the age thing, that's powerful.
Good. Okay. Rob, how about you? We'll just go around in a circle.
I was just reminded again that a key foundational piece to all of this is the fact that we're trying to encourage, support, empower, send out ordinary people,
Yes.
and not just the ordained, the leaders that are in the churches, but if this is going to happen, we need to have our everyday people impacting their neighborhoods, their communities.
Mm-hmm. It really does tend to focus us back on this really Protestant Reformation concept, doesn't it, of the priesthood of all believers. That even though all of our Protestant churches, evangelical churches, I think we all would agree that we believe that. In practice, though, there's been a separation. Yeah. Josie?
One of the things were mentioned yesterday, being identified with the lost people, because I know how important it is, but when I see some guys doing that, I say, that's weird, that's too much. But so if I do this, I can explain. But when I see others doing that, that's a bit strange. And anyway, I just this is one of the points, being identified with the others.
Thank you, Josie. Dori?
Kedves barátaim,
My dear friends,
én amikor errefelé jöttem, volt bennem egy kérdés,
when I was coming here, I had a question.
és föltettem Józsinak ezt a kérdést,
I asked from Józsi,
de közben vártam, hogy itt megkapjam azt a választ.
and I wanted really to get the answer here for that question.
Mivel nagyon sok embereket tudunk elérni,
Because we can reach a lot of people.
mindig kérdés volt bennem az, hogy amúgy kik lesznek a tanítványaim ezek közül.
I always had a question, okay, from those people that I'm reaching, who will be my disciples?
És amikor veletek együtt János 6:44-46-ot átvettünk,
And when we were going through John 6:44,
rájöttem egy dologra, egy alapvető dologra.
I realized a very simple thing.
Azok lesznek azok, akik akarnak vállalnak a tanulást, hogy
Uh-huh.
akarnak tanulni és engedelmeskedni.
Those will be who will want to be obedient and will want to be a part of it.
Próbálkoztam gondolni, hogy mi alapján választotta Jézus Krisztus őket.
I try to somehow get it. How did Jesus choose all his disciples?
De most már nem fogom kérdezni ezt, és nem fogom így gondolni, rá fogom jönni a dologra.
But from now on, I'm not gonna question this. I'm just gonna figure it out.
Tetszett még a 3 oszlopos dolog, tehát a tanulás, az nagyon tetszett,
Uh-huh.
hogy tudom
I really like the way you are doing the study with the 3 columns, and I will use that as well.
Köszönöm szépen ezt a 3 leckét.
So
Great.
thank you very much for these 3 lessons.
Yeah, thank you, Doreen. Those are nice. I think for me too, Doreen, those were two of for the whole paradigm, those are probably 2 of the top 7 or 8 important things to me too. That John 6:44 and 45, and just the simplicity of a Bible study that pushes you towards doing something about it. Yeah.
Bocsánat, ezt most nem figyeltem, mert készültem arra, hogy én akarok mondani. De ő neki, értetted? Szupi. Jó.
Kell az.
And then, thank you, Doreen. How about you?
So I really like the concept of Shama lifestyle.
Yeah.
I really like that to live out loud our faith, what we are in, or what is Christ in us. So yeah, I really want to identify with that.
Uh-huh. Thanks, Corny. Alush.
I like the thought that in the Western culture we are knowledge-based education. We have knowledge-based education, but in the East it was action-based.
Action-based, yeah.
And I like the concept that you only know if you do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just, I don't know.
Right. So we would call that obedience-based discipleship versus knowledge-based discipleship. And, it's funny though, now that you mention that, Balush, because it seems like only in the area of learning, academic learning, teaching that we keep to the sort of the knowledge-based ideas, whether it's at facultet or in school, in our churches, which I think we have sort of adopted some of that. But in all other areas of life, it's you learn a little and you do it. You know, you have practice. How do you become a good football player? How do you become a musician? How do you learn how to be a doctor? How do you learn how to do almost anything in life? You get some information and then you practice it along with somebody who helps you to do it, right? But in the church, we've gotten away from that and we just rely on the information. So we need to get back to that. Good. I like that a lot. But Andras or Paolo?
For me, this 3 columns technique and the whole lesson, Shema lifestyle.
Yeah. Okay. Shema and the 3 column.
Yeah.
Okay. Really simple ideas that are useful for all believers. And it's easy to teach them too.
Yeah.
Andras, how about you?
And for me is from the 3-column technique is the I will statement, so that something magic happens when you speak out loud, I will, like God did when God told let it be, and so the whole universe was created that way. So I think that when we reach that point in the end of a sermon or a gathering, so that people can say that I will, that would create space for things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will. That's exactly right. Okay. Thank you, guys. Is there anything else anybody wanted to share that was useful?
Just one more thing that I think the introductory session was that the importance of the Word of God. And again, you know, for us as believers, the Word of God is okay because we know that that's what it is. But even for non-believers, for outsiders, just somehow introducing the Word to those guys, and that the Word works itself or himself. So you know that is enough, of course, together with the Holy Spirit. But you know. That was just a kind of new realization. Oh yeah, of course, the Word is still the Word. So,
Yeah. Because all of us, I don't know, I'd say at least most of us were before I became a believer, I didn't understand a lot of what the Bible said, but I did understand a lot of it's quite plain, and I could understand it, and it did impact me. So, yeah, I think we all know that, but we forget it when it comes to the lost people. So I'm going to move a little closer today, since we have a smaller circle. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'd like to do a little bit more quick review right now. Just so you guys remember, I put this DMM cycle up on the board yesterday. We just went through it really quick. But let's just go through it really quick one more time together. Who remembers what we start with here? Obedient disciple, yeah. Basically, an obedient disciple who hears the word, who does the word, and not just hears it, does it. A disciple worth reproducing, some people would say. And then here, extraordinary prayer, just people want to become people and groups who just pray more. Trusting God to do something. Then obedient disciple who prays more, groups that pray more, do this. Engage lost people. Spending time just figuring out how to get ourselves, just pay attention to what's going on around us, whether it's our access ministry. I mean, some people already have that. If you work with youth, you know, or maybe feeding the poor is another like access ministry where you've just whatever you're doing, people are coming to you or you're going to them. You're a doctor. Even if you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, a teacher, we all have some kind of access As foreigners, ours is a little bit different. We have to work a little harder at it. We've got our neighbors. We have just living life. We have a pro-life ministry in Sarajevo, so that brings us into contact with people. We now use media to movement as another tool to gain access to lost people. So just engaging lost people intentionally. Then what would we be doing here? Yeah, we're looking for these spiritually open people, whether we call them a person of peace or people use different terms. I've heard somebody else call this, instead of a person of peace, they call it a fourth soil person. The idea is it's somebody who's just has a greater capacity for understanding God's word, and they open up their social networks to the message and the messenger. Another way of saying it is it's an influential person who's open. A bridge person, yeah, another way of saying it would be a bridge person. And I would say, and others would say too, that this person of peace or this bridge person, I think in most cases where it's happening, this person turns out to be becomes a Christian, but not always. Sometimes they just open the door or build the bridge and other people go across it. Gatekeepers, yeah. They're just influencers, yeah. And then once we find these people, our next goal would be to try and invite them to read the word in a DBS format, ideally with their friends or family. Whether it's one other, two other, three other people, whatever. That's what we're trying for. And then we hope that becomes what? We hope it becomes a simple church, spiritual community, whatever you want to call it. And then here, ultimately, we want to develop leaders. And then the cycle can repeat.
In Sergio, after you left, one of Auntie's friends started asking about being, becoming interested through Auntie's life. So that was part of his oikos or his group. Did you ever meet Arpi? But this is in Romania. Arpi, who's a businessman, became a Christian, and when he did, people out of his family, people he worked with, people in his sphere of influence. So far, I think the number is like 55.
Wow.
That've come to the Lord. He's just become that person of peace. But you never knew.
I heard that
Yeah. Yeah. So there was that affinity group that he was targeting, which was the business people, and then one person opened the door to his whole oikos, which included the people that he was working with, and it's just been amazing. Yes. About right now, the number's like at 50 or 55 through RP. Yeah. Yeah, I'll show you the building later. They bought the bank building.
Okay, we're going to do something this morning till 1 o'clock with a couple of breaks. We want to cover three big things. Number one is this idea of this person of peace, bridge person. We'll just use the word person of peace because that's what Jesus used in the gospel. And then we want to talk about ways that we can be looking for and identify like groups of peace, if we will, okay? And then the third thing is we want to start practicing the full Discovery Bible study process. Okay, those are the three big things we want to do today. We're going to start with these two passages in Luke and Matthew where Jesus sends out the 12, and then he sends out the 72. And he gives them basically the same instructions. And there's actually a third case in Mark, which maybe just is probably describing one of the other sendings. So he's at least 2, maybe 3 times he sends them out. We have some record of that. Gives them specific instructions about what to do and what not to do, okay? So that's what we're going to do this morning. We're not going to spend, because of time limitations, we won't spend as much time on it as we would have. So let's do this. Luke 10, 1 through 16. I'm going to make 2 groups. That's one. And let's see, how do we want to do this? Do it all together? I'm just going to, because we've got a pretty small group here, let's just do this together, okay? We're going to do, let's just do Luke first. So why don't we, everybody just read this passage to yourself. It's quite familiar. And then we'll do something similar for the Matthew passage. Just take a few minutes and read it. Okay. Like I said, I'm going to do this in a more of a faster way, just so that we have an opportunity to, enough so that we can sort of agree that, I don't know if everybody will agree, but at least that we can see that Jesus is giving some specific instructions to these disciples, and I'm going to suggest that this is a very flexible type of pattern that Jesus has instituted here with these disciples that we see repeated in the book of Acts. Okay? And I don't mean in a very wooden, concrete way, but I mean in a broad, really flexible way. You don't have to agree with that, but that's what I believe. So, excuse me. Let's do this. First, let's take a look at, we're going to make kind of like two lists, and I encourage you to write these down as we do this, as we study this together. And the first list is going to be, we're going to try and identify the type of person that Jesus tells the disciples to look for. In other words, what are the characteristics of this person he says to look for? Okay? In Luke. And whatever you suggest, give us the verse that you're referring to, okay? I'll give you a hint. There's not a ton of characteristics there. There's just a few. The characteristics of the person that Jesus says to look for when he sends out the 72. What type of person? So I'm asking you to give me the verse and the characteristic of what we're looking for. And it's not really super, super clear. You have to really look a little bit. Okay, which verse?
It's a verse. Okay, we said here, 7. Drink and eat and drink whatever they offer to you.
Okay, so it's a hospitable person because it's clearly if they invite you into their home and they feed you and give you something to drink, that is some kind of form of hospitality in any culture. Okay. By itself, it doesn't make them a person of peace because there's a lot of hospitable people, because culture requires that. So that's one thing. What else do we see here? This is
It can be a person in culture because it says in verse 8 it says you eat whatever.
This is verse 7 here, hospitality, because he feeds and gives drink.
Verse 6.
Verse 6 is?
Peace, rest on them.
Okay, so peace. What would that kind of imply about this type of person? If
He manages to group around all people from all walks of life. So he manages to talk to either like a philosopher or somebody who is very far from that, and he manages to just manage many.
Okay, let me ask you this, Belush. Where do you see that in the text?
No.
Okay, so we want to stick to what the text says, okay? That may or may not be true about this person, but on the text, we don't know that, okay?
But I mean, that is in verse 6 it says that, your peace shall rest upon him. That means that, it's a kind of, he's able to receive some kind of something what we.
Yes, somehow he's receptive to what the messenger, the disciple, is bringing into his house. So you could see he's receptive, however we want to call that, in some way.
Receptive for something, I don't know what.
For something, we don't know yet really what, but he's a.
New Contemporary Creation Translation actually says if in the house is somebody who cares about the peace. I'm not sure that's correct. You have to check. Yes.
Is there anything else we can figure out from this? Even if you just go back to verse 5, it says, you know, verse 5 says, when you enter the house. So again, it's kind of this idea here. He's invited you in. He or she has invited you into their house, their space. Invites in. That's verse 5. That's verse 5, the very. When you enter the house, so it implies that he or she has invited you into the house.
Verse unwilling to listen to the word of God in verse 16.
Verse 16, okay, let's look down at verse 16. Verse 16 says, he who listens to you listens to me, and who rejects you rejects me and the one who sent me. Okay, so verse 16. Listens. Again, it implies, if he listens to you, it implies some people are going to listen. Some are going to listen, some are not going to listen. Okay? So anyways, those are the main characteristics in this Luke passage. And now we're going to look at the Matthew passage, okay? Let's take a look at Matthew. Matthew, read it again to just quietly to yourself. Matthew 9:35. Matthew 9:35 to 10:16. (9:35 to 10:16). Can you read that? 9:35 to 10:16. So it's part of chapters. 10:16.
The verse 13 it says that worthy, but it talks house, but actually it says household, worthy. I don't know what does it mean, but yeah, but it says oiko. Oikos is the Greek word behind, which means probably household. Mm-hmm.
Well, in 11 it says, find out who is worthy. So it has both at the household. Verse 11 says, find out who is worthy in it, in the house, and then 13 is the worthy house. So there's the person and the household. Yeah.
So it says look for his worthy persons as well as a worthy household, oikos. Oikos being the Greek for household.
Since it says in verse 6 to go to the lost sheep of Israel, he had to have been he has to be a lost sheep. I mean, if they are following his, if they're told to go to the lost sheep, I think to some degree they wouldn't go to that house if he wasn't part of the lost sheep of Israel. Now, what that means to us, I don't know.
Well, I think I would, for these two passages, I'll just tell you what I think. It looks to me that Jesus is, these are training exercises. Disciples have been with Jesus for a while.
In this passage,
I forgot to turn it back on. Uh-oh.
uh-oh.
Sorry about that.
In this passage also you have the He's been invited in what you see above, the type of person he is. Somehow he was allowed or they were allowed in the house, or will be allowed in the house. So he's an inviting person, and receives them.
Mm-hmm.
So some similar characteristics as to the first one.
Yep. Very similar. We're looking at basically the same characteristics in two different passages. So 2 sendings to the Jews, to a wider group of people with more disciples, but he's basically giving the same instructions. Look at verse 14. Once again, we have for a similar, it's implied. If anyone will not welcome you, or listen to your words, shake the dust off. Which also means that if they don't listen, shake the dust off your feet, but it also implies that some are going to listen. So those who receive you, receive the messenger, receive the message, because they listen to it.
There's also in Matthew 9:37 verse and 38, it implies that this is a person with a presumption of being a worker.
There is if it does imply that. Yeah. So that's verse 35? 37. So that's an interesting thought. Sasha says that he tells them to pray to God as the Lord of the harvest to raise up workers for the harvest field. And then he sends them out into the harvest field. So the implication is that some of these persons of peace are people that they're going to find who receive the messenger, receive the message, hospitality. They're the future, what? They're the future harvest workers, aren't they? So they're out there in the field. So that's definitely implied there, future workers. Okay. That's all for the type of person. Again, this bridge person, a person of peace, worthy person, Jesus calls it. We don't see that word again in the New Testament. That's why I think it's not a concept to build doctrine around, but it does appear to be a pattern, and that's all I'm suggesting. And it's a pattern that we do see repeated in the book of Acts. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay? Now I want to go back to both of these passages and look at some of the things that Jesus told the disciples to do and to not do when he sends them out. Okay, again, they're both are very, very similar. So I'm going to erase this. So, okay. Go ahead, though, and start looking at those passages on your own and start making a list on your paper of, you might want to make 2 lists, okay? What did Jesus tell them to do? What did he tell them not to do? What to do, what not to do, and start with Luke, the Luke passage. take a few more minutes. We'll go through these. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about this now and identify some of the things that Jesus told the disciples to do and not to do as he sends them out. Sends out 72 of them. Some translations say 70, not for sure. And I want to suggest too that around the world, in some places where there's movements starting to happen, in some places they're actually trying to do these things, follow this pattern, pardon?
All the way.
Yeah, kind of literally. And I'm not saying that it's meant to be literally followed for all generations, but I'm still saying I think there's a pattern here. And when we first learned, were trained in this, they encouraged us to experiment with this, go out and, 2 by 2, and literally try to do these things in a contemporary sort of way. How do you try to do that? So whether or not you actually want to do that, some people do and find it to be a good exercise, and they actually, again, it's up to God to lead us to these open people wherever they are.
Just have a comment on it that it is this 2 by 2 is a strange thing because of course we tried it and somehow it worked out, but when we see the Jehovah's Witnesses, they do this, and I think there's a kind of good principle what they apply from the Bible, even though I disagree with them. Mm-hmm. But we can see the result that they are successful, because they somehow forcefully do these 2 by 2 things, going door to door, mm-hmm. And they have significant numbers in their churches and communities because of they do this. So I think even though I certainly disagree with them, but the principle, the 2 by 2, yeah, somehow works even there. That's
Sorry, just an experience. One of my youth leaders preached about this passage a few years ago. So with my friend, we decided to do it actually. and we hitchhiked to a place in Hungary with just one bag. Actually, we didn't want to bring a bag, but our parents didn't let us. So they said you need to bring a spray because it's not in the Bible not to bring a spray with you. So we brought deodorant, yeah. But we didn't bring anything with us, so we decided to sleep outside on the street and see what happens. We actually brought no money, but my parents didn't allow us, so we brought the bank card. But we actually, yeah, that's not money, yeah. And actually, on the very first day, we met the person of peace in the village. They invited us, and they said, we are going to be your parents until you stay here. So we asked them to be able to just sleep outside, just for the sake of it, sleeping outside. So we slept outside for the first day. But from that point on, we slept with his son and his daughter-in-law. And it turned out to be a really interesting adventure because they were tobacco csempészek. What's that? Smugglers. Yeah. And on the very week when we were there, one of their friends were arrested. And they asked us to bring the tobacco back into the bush and stuff like that. And then I felt that the Holy Spirit just said to me, go to the woman, to the old lady, and tell her that it's not what God wants for your life. And it turned out that she did Bible school previously. She was part of a church previously, but she went away because of this tobacco thing.
Yeah.
And it's just something we experienced, and I think it was really, well, it was an adventure on one thing, but it did work out for us.
That's a great story. So as Yoshi says, it's the principle in figuring out how to do the principle of doing ministry with somebody is the goal. What is that? So people don't think we're JWs or something weird, but we can do it. We've done it in Sarajevo, and it can work. It can work. So I'm not suggesting that it's the only way to do ministry, but clearly it's a pattern that we see repeated in the New Testament, at least sometimes when people are doing intentional ministry activities like this, you say, we need to do this together.
My boss has been trying to get me to do this kind of thing for a while. My boss has been trying to get me to do this, do what we're doing now, get involved in DMM for a long time, but I was by myself, and I'd get bogged down. I encourage others, but nobody was encouraging me to keep going. And then he came back, and just when I'm, down, he's up. When he's up, and it's just.
There's a lot
together.
of practical benefits to it because we encourage one another. We learn from. If you're talking to somebody, like two of us talking to a person who might be interested, every time that's happened, if I'm talking, my friend is listening, and he can think of very helpful things to that I maybe miss, or it's really helpful in a conversation in the right circumstance. It's very biblical. People aren't a person isn't intimidated by two people usually if it's the right if they're approached right, even if they're a stranger. Three people can be intimidating. So does that. But anyways, it's the principle. It's the principle, So, what else do we see here? What else does Jesus tell the disciples to do?
He sends them out to go where he will go.
He says to go ahead of him where he's going to go. I think what's the principle there for us, maybe? Yeah, just praying, being sure we're praying before we go out. These are training things, and we got to be careful about applying them too literally, because remember also, Balash was doing with his friend, I think this is a beautiful exercise, and we've tried to do the same thing, including going without supplies and things like that. But what does Jesus tell the disciples at the end of his ministry before he's arrested? Do you remember? He says, he tells them, he says, hey, remember when I sent you out? Did you lack for anything? I told you not to take anything, but did you lack for anything? And they said no. And he says what? He says, now when you go, take with you a sword, take with you what you need to go. So that's what I mean. We're allowed to take stuff with us. There's additional teachings, but it's okay to practice with these things that he says, and it's okay to take money with you and spray or a knife, to protect yourself or whatever. Okay, what else? So he says to go where to go. You pray and try to get God's guidance about where we ought to go if we do a 2x2 type of thing. Could just be in the neighborhood. It could be to another city,
Did we already say pray for laborers?
No, we haven't said that.
So at the beginning, pray for laborers because we realize that we're inadequate for what he wants to do. That we're just the beginning and we're not the...
Yes.
It doesn't all depend on us.
Absolutely. This is huge. I really think this is so important. I really believe what we said at the beginning, that the future laborers are right out there in the harvest field right now, that are waiting for an opportunity to hear and understand the gospel and believe. So they're out there, and they're going to be our future laborers. And this paradigm, I believe, will help us to, when we find them, equip them and start making disciples of them from the very beginning. And be our future leaders.
It's opening the way for us making the fertile ground, because if we're sent and we're going in the power of Jesus where he wants us to go, I'm pretty sure we'll find the people hang out hanged over from the last night's party or something.
Yeah, they're out there.
These are the workers for the future.
They're out there. They're out there. We just...
Just one comment. It's rather a question. Sorry to interrupt, but is it like, so when you have to shake the dust off your feet, what does it mean that the city itself is not ready to receive? So there is no person of peace in that city. So when you enter a city and you don't meet anybody right away, just for that few hours that you are there maybe, and God doesn't bring the person of peace to you, does it mean that there is no person of peace in that city, so that you can move along because the city is spiritual, not ready to receive, or God has not started his work in anybody previously? Otherwise, does it imply that when you go into a city, God will bring the person of peace right into your face?
Right. So that's a really good question, and it could be a really a good discussion. And I don't know that we might not all agree about it. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to tell you what I think. And you may agree with me and you may not. I think it absolutely does not mean that. When we're, in the case of here, we're talking about small towns and villages, maybe a few hundred people, maybe a few thousand people. There's no way that I feel we could say like in Sarajevo, because I had a coworker suggest that before. So we've been doing this for several years. We have not found a person of peace in Sarajevo. Okay, Sarajevo is a city of what, 300,000 people. Can we fairly say that we've gone into every neighborhood and area of the city and not found anybody? No, there's no way we can say that. And in modern cities, they're like a conglomeration of villages, and neighborhoods are unique. They have their own character. I just don't think you can say that. I just don't. So, yeah, I think it would take years. I think it would take years of a lot of people praying and going out to be able to say that.
But as for the time that you are there,
Yeah.
and you don't speak, and you just say, okay, I'm done with this, like it was on the rest.
I think you can, but it doesn't mean that there's not a person of peace there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's like, okay, for this weekend, for this week or this weekend that we're doing this, we're going to choose this part of town. We've prayed. We think that this is where we're going to go. We don't find anybody in that neighborhood. Okay, we're going to go back home. We didn't find anybody. I don't think it means that there's nobody there. It just means that there was a timing thing. We didn't find anybody. And we got to remember too, we're foreigner. You're going into as a foreign person, as an outsider into somebody else's territory, and that's a really good thing to do. And you guys had this really, really interesting experience doing that. And I've heard others talk about doing it and finding real people of peace. But I don't think we can safely say that every time we do it, we're going to find a person of peace.
There's also the interesting thing in the Matthew passage about asking who is worthy and doing some kind of research there to see who. That's an interesting, how would you define that, a worthy person? But
Yeah.
it seems like there's some kind of research that you're doing to find the most likely person who would be interested in God's message.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think we were doing the worthy person of peace before you got here, DP.
Okay.
But I think that's a fair suggestion, though, that you can, we've done that. We've asked, we're to just meet people when we're going into a place as outsiders. And, as Americans, like, we're really outsiders. Going to a small city and just trying to have conversations with people and just even suggest that we're just praying for your town, that God would bless it. And you're just asking if there's people around here that, hey, is there any like really special people around here that everybody thinks is like a very respected person that people really like? And if so, could we meet them? Things like that.
Can we have a story from Tomas in Novi Sad with his wife?
Okay.
Are you prepared, Tomas? Are you finished eating whatever you're eating? They started prayer walking and they found what you want to call the Beochin story. You can't hear me. You can hear me through this. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try to put up your volume. I'm going to put you on speaker. Can you share a couple minutes about that? They have a delay. Did you understand, Tomas, the question? Okay, the story of going to Beochin, prayer walking, meeting Vesna.
Should we continue on? Okay. We're going to push on through this. Again, because of time limitations. But again, I'll go back to what Balush talked about, this idea of when you don't find people of peace, which is implying you're talking to people and they're sort of like not interested. And Jesus tells the disciples in both passages to, if they reject you, they reject me, shake the dust from your feet, warn them, shake the dust. How do we actually apply that in our neighborhood? It could be, you've got two scenarios. You've got a place where you kind of live and you know people and they know you, or you go to a new place where maybe people don't know you, but you're going like out. How do you do that? That's for me, that's a hard one to apply, but I think what I'm going to say is this, It's worth trying. I've heard people do it different ways to do a gentle warning, you know, not like a angry sort of like, you guys are really messing up. If you don't believe what I'm here to say, you're in trouble. There's ways of doing it that are more friendly. But I would say this, and this is a kind of a principle for this. Just because we don't understand something in a passage, maybe it's a difficult passage, maybe it's like this, it doesn't mean that we can't apply and obey what we do understand in the passage, okay? We can still do that. Doesn't mean we have to understand. If we don't understand something, okay, I don't understand it, maybe God will give me insight, but let me obey and apply the things that I do understand. I do understand that I could go out 2 by 2. I do understand to pray to the Lord of the harvest. Maybe I don't quite know how to warn somebody in the best possible way, according to this. Okay. Yes, Andras.
One idea that came to my mind is that don't mix this verse with arrogance that sometimes we experience during ministry. So don't be arrogant to people. And the other is that there is a type of person I call the energy vampire. So that sucks your energy out. So it means that when you start to deal with people, and if you see that they just wanna get more and more and more and more, but there's nothing happening in return, then be brave enough to say, okay, thanks for being with you, but I need to go further. It's also, there's a business idea in development, what is called a quick kill strategy. So it's called a quick kill strategy in drug development, so that in the discovery phase you tend to spend a lot of your resources and time on a potential new drug candidate, but in the end it will not work out. So you need to have a wisdom to say that, okay, we stop with that and we just change our focus to something else. So this is what is called quick kill strategy. And so I think that it's the same here, that Jesus says that, okay, just don't talk to them who rejected you. Don't spend time on and move on. Yeah.
They haven't rejected you, they rejected me.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So it's not. So don't feel yourself guilty moving on, because that's the other, that sometimes you feel yourself that I'm really guilty because I should have spent more time with these people.
Or maybe if I give you just one more chance, then things would have turned over.
Yeah. We've got some. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Can we let Thomas just share from
Sure.
what he said? We're gonna try, I don't know, microphone is helpful, or we just do like this. Can I do full screen?
You need to speak really, really loudly.
Can you shout?
Go for it. He's not here.
We don't hear what's. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, go.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. I'm going to summarize. So I don't know how much you could understand in the poor reception there, but the fact that his wife felt called with this woman from Novi Sad together out of their home group, small group, to go to this Beochin, which is, they went by taxi, I think, first too, and just showed up and started walking, and God just gave them signs of, let's go here, let's go there, and prayed with a few people, and then eventually the flower shop lady, who's always out in front of her shop, I got to visit once too with them, very friendly, welcomes everyone, have a coffee, sit down. She knows the whole city and knows the mayor, which led to the mayor eventually saying, hey, if you want to do something to help our people, please come. And they're thinking about some kind of discovery or alpha course or something to open the doors further. It's a beautiful picture of Vesna. May not be the person of peace, but at some level she's the person who's connected to everyone else. Even though she has this Catholic background, still a little skeptical, not sure where her faith is. She keeps saying, oh, you need to meet these ladies, or Tomas when he goes with, because they've got something important to say, and they're faithful believers. So it's a wonderful story.
It's good. It's a good story.
One thing that I would,
So they can't hear at all. I don't know. Is there something transmission?
they're not hearing.
You can't hear either from Jim? Yes? Okay, Jim, you can. But this is not working. Okay, we'll go back to Jim.
Okay.
Besides praying, which is really important, but right after saying pray, he says go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's a lot of action here. It's go, then entering towns, entering houses. There's a lot of taking initiative.
There really is, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of speed through this from the material, and we're going to take a break, okay? This is to me, it's interesting. It's really enjoyable to talk about this and discuss it a little bit more, but we're just going to have to move on because of time. As you guys probably have on your lists, some other things. Verse 3, Jesus notes that when he sends them out, he warns them it could be dangerous.
Right.
So that's something we need to keep in mind. Just because it's dangerous, does that mean we should not go? No. I mean, we want to be smart and wise, but it could very well be dangerous, like sheep among wolves. He does say to leave behind money and bags and tools and things. So that could be an interesting thing to experiment with, just like you guys did.
They already almost stole our shoes when we were sleeping outside. The guy, no, mine. No, just a simple gypsy guy came, and he was about to take my shoes when my friend woke up. So I ran.
Yeah, there you go. Different kinds of danger, thieves, people who will hurt you. Verse 4, Jesus tells them not to greet anybody on the road. Again, the implication is it's not that we're not supposed to be friendly, but we're supposed to stay focused and don't spend a lot of time being distracted by other possibly good things, but be focused on what I've told you to do. Let your peace rest on people and places if they receive you. Wherever you go, receive what they offer you in terms of hospitality. Hello? Can you hear me? So he's saying, if you go someplace and somebody engages with you and wants to talk to you, and they offer you hospitality, receive the hospitality. That may be in terms of food that might be strange to you. It might be, in my case, it might have, it could be something to drink that you don't ordinarily drink, but receive the hospitality. And remember, in this case, this is Jews who are probably going into pagan homes and places and offered food that's unclean. So this is radical for Jesus to be telling them to do this. Here, verse 8, he tells them to do something. He says, heal the sick. Heal the sick. Verse 9, tell the message of the kingdom of God. Verse 10, he says to warn them if they reject it. And that's all for, we're not going to have time to do the Matthew passage, you guys, so I'm just going to note a few other things that are in addition. In verse 8 of Matthew 10, Jesus also kind of repeats this, heal the sick, but he also says, raise the dead and cast out demons, okay? So these are things that he instructed them to do. I think they're things that we can have in our consciousness of the possibility that we should be looking for the unexpected opportunities that God might lead us into. Look for a worthy person, greet, bless. He says, give a blessing, proclaim the kingdom. And so the rest of it's pretty much the same. The same instructions in both of these training mission exercises. I'm going to finish with this for right now, and then we're going to take a break. This goes back to the person of peace idea. I'm just going to give us something that's going to be in your notes, and it's an easy way to remember it. I don't know if you've noticed, you all, but at least Americans are always coming up with what we call acronyms to help us remember stuff. Pardon? Yes, exactly. And here's the one that could help us to remember person of peace characteristics. Sometimes they, I don't know, a woolly person. Woolly person. They're welcoming. They welcome a person. They're hospitable, okay? And remember, we're looking for all of these characteristics. We're not just looking for one of them. And this one would be opens their oikos, opens their household, opens their, whatever is the contemporary version of the household, which could just be your group of friends. It could be people at your work. It could be your family. And then, what do you think this one might be? L.
Listen.
Exactly. Listens. In some way, this person welcomes you. Personally, they open you. They also open up their oikos, their household, their circle of friends, whatever that looks like, and they listen. They listen to what you have to say. It doesn't automatically mean that they receive and believe what you have to say, but they listen. These are all really good signs. It's no guarantee that you found this, like, somebody once told me when I was doing this training, he says, so what you're saying is this person of peace is like some kind of a magic person, right? I said, yeah, you guys, they're a special person. We believe that God has really anointed in some special way, and that's it. So, a woolly person is, I think they're out there, and that's what we're looking for. But along the way, we're going to find a lot of people who don't fit this, who are still going to be open, and we don't want to reject them either. We just got to figure out how to work with them. That's just a way of calling it a woolly person. In English, you can't say a wool person. You have to say a woolly person. No, don't worry about it. Just do that. Just remember that. Okay, break time. Let's take 10, 15 minutes. And then when we come back, we'll see if we have any just questions and comments.
Yes, break. How long will the break?
10 minutes.
We got to finish in time for lunch, guys.
Push pause, 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, we already lost 1 minute.
Uh-huh.
I find that interesting.
I'm going to sit down.
The whole, the Jewish idea of what was clean and unclean was so powerful that Peter had to see this dream 3 times.
Yeah, I
before he
hadn't thought
wrote
about that.
what he
Uh-huh.
used. In this passage, at 2 different times, within 2 verses, it says, when you remain in the house, eating and drinking what they provide, then 2 verses later, eat what they give you. It's like they had.
Do it a couple
to
times,
me,
yeah.
This is part of the proof that they were going to cross-cultural.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were having to be encouraged
Uh-huh.
2 times. Peter 3 times. They're encouraged 2 times.